Good morning, everyone. My name is Gita, and I am joined today by Bharati and Lorna and Surendra. We're so happy that you've come to us today. So, living in the presence of God. This was a wonderful topic. I really enjoyed preparing, sharing for you today. We all look to the masters first to say, okay, what does this mean, living in the presence of God? And we read something like Samadhi, the poem by Yogananda, the experience of omnipresence, nirvana, the experience of oneness, and we go, wow, this sounds amazing, but to the point of practicality, what is it like to move through the world living in this presence? Yogananda, there's many, many stories, of course, from all the great masters about what that's like. Yogananda being more contemporary than most, we have access to more of the daily life through his disciples and through his own writings. And there's a great story where he would drive with his disciples between the Hollywood Church and Encinitas regularly between doing services. And he enjoyed, apparently, a treat called Scottish shortbread. And for any of you who last night enjoyed World Brotherhood Day, there was some Irish shortbread, and I don't want to mix the two, but I would say that if Scottish shortbread is anything like Irish shortbread, it is really good. And I understand why Yogananda enjoyed it. So anyhow, they would stop by this little shop, and they would buy this shortbread, and Yogananda would share it with the disciples, and this was just a regular activity. Well, one day, the disciple went in to buy the shortbread, and there was no shortbread. And so he came back to the master and came into the vehicle and said, "Master, they were sold out. There's no shortbread." And Yogananda smiles, and he looks up, and he says, "Divine Mother, what now?" An example of, he's just moving through the world with her, always. And what now? Why this? And as he says this, a ray of light, like sunlight, touches the roof of this little shop, and out comes the proprietor with shortbread in hand and says, "Oh, I was saving this for a customer. They didn't show. I can make more. I wanted this to be for you." I think that might be what it's like. Totally in tune. And who was that for? I'm sure for the disciples. Yogananda showing that even in the little things, she's there. She's always there. There was another story where Yogananda goes into a shop, and a random shop of very random items, and starts to fill his little basket with these random items and goes to the counter. This is late in the day, and the shopkeeper is totaling up his balance, and she reaches the total amount, and she starts to cry. And she says, "I needed just this exact amount today, and I close in an hour, and I had lost hope. And here you are." Living in the presence, always in tune. I mean, these are the little examples of the practical day-to-day. And there's so many more, but one of the real challenges that I think we all face is when we're trying to live in the presence, we're trying to see God, and we see suffering. This might be the greatest barrier. It also might be the greatest opportunity for transformation. When we look at the life of St. Francis, who is a beautiful example, less contemporary. He was back in the Middle Ages in 1200 or so. This seeing of suffering was the call for his transformation. He lived a life of ease and comfort, not unlike the Buddha, which also had transformation through seeing the suffering. But in this case, St. Francis is living the life, and when you read about him, he was the life of the party. They called him the minstrel. He hosted these grand events, and everybody wanted to spend their time with him. He was so carefree. I don't know if any of you have enjoyed the show or the movie Wicked, but there's a character that really embodies this. He's a prince, and he shows up, and he sings this hilarious carefree song. So this was actually St. Francis's life. He loved life and the world. And then there came a point, and it wasn't sudden. There came several points along the way, but the real moment of transformation where he transferred his love of life into the love of God through suffering. He had been, like I said, he'd been slowly making this transformation, and one day found himself riding probably through the countryside, and around the bend came a leper. And in this culture and this time, that was abhorrent. You wanted nothing to do with the lepers. And this leper comes walking toward him just on the road. And his initial reaction is that which he's been accustomed to, fear. And then something washes over him, this great compassion. And he gets down and he approaches this leper. And he comes to him, and his hands are covered in sores. And just without any thought, he takes his hands and he kisses them, the leper's hands. And he looks him in the eyes, and he beams love at this leper. And the man there is taken aback and receives that love. And then they go on. But just 10 paces or some short distance, St. Francis turns to just look back at at the man, and he's gone, vanished. He says it was a test. Do you love me? Everywhere, in everything. And it taught him, which he turned and taught the world for the rest of his life, to love all as brother and sister and friend. And he went actually from there to the leper colony and began to work with the lepers. And that's where the transformation continued. And that group, who he first served, named him St. Francis first. The Buddha, as I said, had his own version of that. He lived his princely life, saw no suffering, and then goes out into the world and sees suffering. And for him, it was, I must overcome this. And he goes under the Bodhi tree, and we all benefit from how he took seeing that suffering and what he turned that into. A more, contemporary example in my own life, we've really enjoyed, we started a service adventure club for sort of older middle grade and middle school youth this fall, and with the intention of sharing with them service and what it means to serve others. And part of that is understanding, at least in small bits, suffering, and so that why we serve. And so our first session, Baudry and I were, preparing for and not quite sure what to do with. And we had a basic outline of what we were going to do. And I was a little worried because what we were going to do was put together little goodie baskets or bags and bring them over to the warming and homeless shelter across from the Beaverton Library. And the worry in me was, what will we experience? This is a first experience for some of these kids. What's going to happen? because we just don't know. And so I said a little prayer. It's like, okay, Master, make this whatever you think it needs to be for us. And so we got together with this first group, and we meditated, and we chanted, and we made our little bags, and we decorated them, and we filled them with goodies. And then we walked together over to the shelter. And it was incredible because we also didn't know what we would find. Sometimes there are people there, sometimes there are not people there. So there were 6 of us, I think, that first session, and we walk up, and there are exactly 6 people in front of the warming shelter, just hanging out. And when they see us and we approach them, they lit up, and we lit up. And there was a real exchange of appreciation that was both ways. It was like they knew that we wanted to help and that we had these littler ones with us, and they met us with that, with real graciousness. And we gave our little sacks of fun things, and they just poured appreciation back. And I was so moved by their kindness to us, by our kindness with them, and by this experience, a first experience of, real service to somebody. We've all had good and bad experiences, I'm sure, where we're trying to do good and we get rejected, or it's, somebody has a breakdown in front of us we're not ready to handle, and the opposite. But this was so blessed, and what a gift. So seeing God in the suffering takes a risk on our part and takes effort on our part, and can be, like I said, some of the hardest experiences, but also hold the possibility for the largest transformation. Oh my goodness, I have so many points and so little time. Okay, well, I'll smooth over the synchronicities, because in fact, I think we can all think of times in our lives when we can see God, because there is incredible, just the perfect thing happens at the perfect moment, and there's no other explanation. I think that we've all got that, right? That's the easy time to experience the presence of God and see God in everything. A harder is, again, beyond suffering, it's when we see ignorance and betrayal in our lives. That is another real challenging time. And we can look to the ultimate. Here we are in the season of Christ, and this is a beautiful moment to remember, forgive them, Lord, for they know not what they do. That when we see injustice, which is everywhere, and I don't want to speak for anyone but myself, but it has been a tough 6 weeks here in this country, watching the dialogue and watching the battles. And then you look at the world, and there is a lot happening that is really challenging. And we have to look at all of that and find a way to see God in that also. And maybe dig deep there to say we are all children of God. Ignorant or wise, just like Master Mahashaya in the reading, in that case they were at least devotionally chanting to God, and he was recognizing that. But the real invitation beyond that is all of us, in all of our states, as ignorant or wise as we are behaving, as badly or good. In Yogananda's life, for those of you that know, one of his disciples, Dhirananda, betrayed him. And that's quite a story. They were very close. Sri Yukteswar, Yogananda's guru, warned Yogananda, don't do it. Don't give him authority and power. But Yogananda stuck to it because loyalty and opportunity, we always have the opportunity. That's why we are incarnate here. We have the chance to either, as Ananda Moy Ma says, move toward the front of the train, closer to God, or to the back of the train, away from God. And if we aren't given those opportunities, we never grow, we never learn. So the opportunity was given, and betrayal was what resulted. But by goodness, Yogananda loved him through it. And I'm sure it was painful, but he loved him through it. Also, in preparing for this talk, I really enjoyed reading one of Yogananda's talks from the Divine Romance called A World Without Boundaries. And in this talk, it felt very presently useful and practical to how we can live in the divine presence and see God in everything, because he spoke these words, a world without boundaries, 1939 in February. The world was moving toward massive war. Germany had already annexed Austria. There was strife everywhere. In the U.S., we were just coming out of the Great Depression. And in this talk, Yogananda starts with expressing how to move toward peace, to move toward love, we need to first break down all of the prejudice that we are trained in our upbringing. In these days, we would call it unconscious bias for most of us. But really break down all those boxes that we are putting people into and defining ourselves by, because those are the things that separate us. He suggests that we take the love we feel for family, expand it to community, to nation, to the world, and never let it stop until it includes every single being. And then, of course, as in every talk you'll ever hear by Yogananda, he says, meditate, meditate, meditate. Because that we need to do that outward work. We need to do that inwardly as well. And the more that we touch into the divine inwardly, the more easy it is to break down those outer barriers. I was very touched, and I just wanted to share this briefly. In my 20s, I went to visit my grandfather. This was a while ago. And he was reading, I was in an African American literature class, and he was reading the same book that I was reading. And I was really taken aback by this. Grandpa, why are you reading this book? And he said, well, I realized I grew up in New York City in the 20s and 30s, and I think I have things I still need to get over and let go of, prejudices and beliefs that aren't serving me anymore. And I was so deeply moved because he was a devout Catholic, and he passed 1 year later. And to know that he was really committed to doing that work that we all need to do outwardly and inwardly, so that we can see the brotherhood, the sisterhood, the connection, and God in all of us, was really, really deeply inspiring to me. I better close. Keep all those quotes for later, but I'm going to close with a Whispers from Eternity, which are poems by Yogananda. Prayer demand for removing the cork of ignorance. No more shall my consciousness remain bottled in this little vessel of flesh, corked with ignorance. No more will I remain moving through the sea of cosmic consciousness night and day, years, decades, and how many incarnations. So close, yet never able to contact thy sea. Through the bursting vibration of cosmic sound and the surging of thy holy name, I have removed the cork of ignorance which so long separated me from thee, though we live together so closely. Now my body consciousness will meet thy all-surrounding, all-pervading consciousness. No longer will I walk heedlessly in thee, but never knowing and feeling thee. Thine image within me shall meet thine image everywhere. By releasing the I-ness in me, I will know that I am thou, and that thou alone art the little egos of us all.